The Palestine conflict is now not just a simmering problem, but a crisis that threatens to drag the whole world into war. For over 75 years, experts from Kissinger to Blinken have worked on the idea of peace in Palestine, and as we see, they have failed utterly. The experts seem to have become prisoners of their own expertise and unnecessarily complicate matters in order to show off their erudition. The solution to the Palestine crisis is hiding in plain sight, but it evidently requires an outsider's innocent perspective and absence of intellectual baggage to see the obvious. To understand why, we must explore the complex history that underpins this enduring conflict, but simplify it enough that we don't get trapped in endless loops. Jewish people lived in Palestine since before the 12th century BCE. The name Palestine itself, interestingly, stems from Philistines, a people likely Greek in origin who bear no relation to the Palestinian Arabs of today. After a revolt against the Roman Empire failed spectacularly, the Jewish population largely deserted the region around 100 CE, but managed to preserve their culture in far-flung communities. Fast forward to the 1500s. Palestine was now inhabited by Arab peoples. The entire region, Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, key parts of what is now Saudi Arabia, and the various Arabian Gulf emirates and sheikdoms, fell under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. 400 years later, needing more allies in the First World War, the British made deals with various Arab factions, promising independence and territory in exchange for help in fighting the Ottomans. Those deals directly gave rise to the super-rich oil states of today, as well as the present boundaries of all the above, points which we will return to later. In the case of Palestine, however, the British promise was a hollow one. After the war, under the 1922 Palestine Mandate, the British embarked on a long-term plan to bring in Jewish immigrants and later establish a separate Jewish state in Palestine. This was virtually identical to their geopolitical strategy in Ireland in the same year, when they gave most of Ireland self-rule, but carved out 6 pro-English counties to retain as Northern Ireland. This was the original two-state side-by-side solution, and it triggered 80 years of unrest and domestic terrorism. Clearly, the British leadership around 1922 and their experts could not think straight and could not foresee obvious consequences. Meanwhile, the 19th century had given birth to Zionism, the movement for a Jewish homeland. This movement garnered support for a variety of reasons, from genuine belief in a homeland for Jews, to strategic diversion for Arabs, and even as an underhand way of getting rid of unwanted Jewish refugees. For 3 decades after World War I, the Arab world opposed the Zionist movement. But in 1947, in the aftermath of the Jewish Holocaust, Israel was born and given almost half the land of Palestine. This was a gross injustice to the Palestinians, and a severe blunder from the perspective of global peace. The Palestinian territories were haphazardly divided into unconnected areas, which were further reduced in the course of the wars that ensued since 1947. Today, Palestinians are left with the Gaza Strip and the unconnected West Bank, while Israel has expanded its territory significantly. The dispossession of the Palestinians led to the rise of groups which committed terrorist atrocities over the years, notably the massacre of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympic Games. Both sides already had good reason to despise and mistrust the other. Then, on October 7, 2023, Hamas, the surviving terrorist organization that actually controlled the Gaza Strip, conducted a raid that resulted in the death or capture of nearly 1,500 innocent Israelis. This triggered a brutal response from Israel, which has resulted in the destruction of over half of Gaza and the death of over 30,000 people, the majority of whom were civilians. Most world leaders support the peace plan du jour, the so-called two-state solution. But this is patently naive, expecting that Israelis and Palestinians will suddenly live in peace side by side and forget the injustices and atrocities of the past 75 years, not to mention the present war, all while Iran continues to fund terrorists with the intent of destabilizing the entire Arab world. The so-called one-state solution is even worse, to make Palestinians third-class citizens in an Israeli state that controls all of Palestine. The war and the hate would just continue, with a much larger cadre of willing terrorists. The two-state side-by-side solution is a non-starter that gives neither side what it wants. Israel would not get security, and the Palestinians would not achieve meaningful sovereignty and prosperity. All past efforts to solve the Palestine problem failed because the experts could only think in zero-sum terms, as an Arab versus Jew struggle over finite territory. It's time for more imagination and audacity. But what if there's a solution? a non-zero-sum, out-of-the-box answer to this problem? What if it takes an outsider to see it? An outsider writing from the Philippines who has the right perspective for a practical and unbiased solution. Our long-standing ties of friendship to the Israelis are one factor. We were the only Asian country to accept Jewish refugees fleeing the Nazis, but we also have a substantial Muslim minority population and many workers in the Middle East. Unlikely though it may be at first blush, someone from the Philippines might just have the perspective to suggest the bridge which leads to peace.